The first human weapon fired in the war was not a missile, not a laser, not a bomb, but a false retreat. And in that single moment, the most advanced alien armada ever assembled made the last correct decision it would ever make. Because every sensor on their ship screamed the same glorious confirmation they had waited centuries to see. Humanity was running, and across their command decks the enemy celebrated before the battle had even begun, unaware that the panicked human fleet breaking. Formation in chaotic disorder was not collapsing in fear, but executing a maneuver so old it had once been used by prey animals on Earth to lead predators into traps. And as their massive weapons powered up and their formations tightened with perfect mathematical elegance, not one of them realized that the war had already shifted into a phase their species had never prepared for. The phase where intelligence replaces firepower, where weakness becomes bait, and where victory is decided long, before the first ship actually dies. And so they pursued with absolute confidence, driving their flawless war engines forward in perfect pursuit arcs, while our ships fled just fast enough to be seen, just slow enough to be tempting, hemorrhaging sparks and debris on purpose, broadcasting distress calls on every channel, as if our crews were breaking apart inside their hulls. And the enemy commanders drank in every signal as proof of inevitable victory, never questioning why our transmissions contained panic but no surrender, terror but no surrender codes, no pleas for mercy, only fear layered over stubborn silence. And while their main guns charged and their formations compressed with killing wave, our retreat pulled them exactly where we wanted them, into the shadowed lattice of dead moons and drifting iron fields left behind by a supernova centuries earlier, a region their predictive warfare models had dismissed as irrelevant terrain because no rational fleet would ever voluntarily enter such navigational chaos, except we had spent 50 years turning chaos into doctrine, and the moment their armada crossed an invisible threshold, every fragment of rock, every derelict hull, every micron of metallic dust ignited with silent human code as millions of cold, dark drones awakened at once, not attacking, not firing, simply moving, flooding enemy sensors with a storm of false vectors, so dense that their battle computers began arguing with themselves in millionth of a second feedback loops, and by the time they realized their targeting was lying to them, by the time their perfect vision fractured into 1,000 contradictory futures, our fleet was already gone again, vanishing like a whispered rumor in the dark, reappearing light seconds behind their rearmost logistics ships where no enemy doctrine allowed for meaningful defense, where arrogance had left nothing but soft arteries exposed. And that was where the real killing began, not with glorious explosions, but with surgical absence as rail rounds folded supply vessels into themselves, as antimatter containment failed in total silence before blinking out entire sections of the enemy's rear formation, as power relays went dead in synchronized cascades, as quantum combuoys vanished one by one, leaving whole battle groups suddenly alone with nothing but static where command voices had once been, and still the enemy believed this was an error, a malfunction, a temporary disorder soon to be corrected because their entire civilization was built on the idea that perfection could not be permanently disrupted by something imperfect. But then our next message reached them, slipped into their own encrypted networks through human viruses designed to self-evolve as they penetrated. And for the first time, the enemy did not receive coordinates or taunts, but pure, unfiltered logic. Charts of their own tactical predictions mirrored, back at them with our countermoves annotated in advance, a battlefield that had already been fought and finished inside human minds weeks before the first ship had ever launched. And as disbelief spread across their command decks, their fleets finally tried to slow, to reform, to reassert order. Yet every correction was already anticipated, every defensive realignment opening 3 new vulnerabilities our swarms exploited with brutal efficiency, never giving them the glorious, decisive clash they craved, starving them instead through 1,000 small amputations until the most powerful fleet in their history began to feel, for the first time, what prey feels like when the predator stops chasing from behind and begins hurting from all sides at once, And when they finally committed their remaining strength into one overwhelming spear aimed straight at our homeworld, as both strategy and revenge, we did not rush to meet them as expected. We did not form defensive lines. We did not even visibly deploy. And the galaxy watched in confusion as the enemy armada thundered forward unopposed, until space itself betrayed them as hidden human mass anchors buried inside the system awakened in perfect synchronicity, twisting gravity into vast overlapping tides that seized the enemy formation mid-burn and tore its perfect geometry into spiraling chaos. Ships slamming into one another as shields failed under forces they had never evolved to resist, engines whining uselessly against an inescapable mathematical death sentence. And in that moment, our fleet returned for the final time, not a scattered prey, but as a unified storm erupting from every blind angle their sensors still had not recovered, striking with everything we had saved, with weapons primitive by their standards, but wielded with precision learned through 1,000 defeats, cutting apart command vessels first, then navigational cores, then the great carrier spines that held their war beasts, and as their final, resistance collapsed into broken, burning fragments drifting into gravity while they had unknowingly triggered themselves. A single human transmission flooded every surviving channel in the sector, calm, steady, almost gentle in its delivery, saying only, "You built weapons to guarantee victory. We built minds to survive defeat." And as the last enemy flagship vanished into silent stellar ruin, the galaxy finally understood what the war had never been about from the very beginning. That humanity had never needed to be the strongest species in the stars, only the one that learned fastest from pain, from failure, from loss, the one that treated every wound as data, every disaster as training, every impossible enemy as a problem that had simply not yet been solved. And long after the battlefield fell quiet, long after the drifting wreckage cooled into frozen tombs, the terrified surviving civilizations of the galaxy passed a new law written not in fear, but in awe, a warning, etched into every academy and war council for generations to come. Never measure humans by the size of their weapons, only by the patience of their traps, because if they ever appear to be losing, the war has already ended. You just haven't understood how yet.